As a kid growing up in the late 80s and early 90s, renting movies and video games was just part of life. But you probably remember the pain of hoping a good game was actually available when you got to the store. More often than not, all that was left were sports games or racing games, and then there was the weird ones like Phalanx, with the old dude playing a banjo on the cover. We should have given it a chance, but let's be honest, that cover made us skip right past it. But one game that almost always disappeared fast, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, Turtles in Time, for the Super Nintendo. This wasn't just another rental. Playing this with your friends felt like having the arcade experience at home. Unlike Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles 2, the arcade game on the NES, where we all knew it wasn't quite the same, Turtles in Time felt different. It felt legit. You had all your favorites, the Rat King, Bebop and Rocksteady dressed as pirates, even Toka and Razor from Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles 2, The Secret of the Ooze. For a Turtle fan, this was a dream come true. I still remember it clearly. Someone had just returned the game, and the video store clerk was scanning it back in. My friend and I made a beeline straight to the counter to reserve it. That weekend, it was going to be epic. Turtles in Time is one of those games a lot of us either rented, owned, or borrowed from a friend. It just became part of the experience of growing up during that era. Welcome Retro Warriors, I'm Mike, the Gaming Road Warrior, your guide and storyteller here in the gaming wasteland, and a former US Navy Seabee. Today we're going back to 1992 to look at what made Turtles in Time so special to play. We'll cover my personal memories, the development history, story, characters, gameplay, and of course, the pros and cons. And in today's 90s Game Break, we'll also talk about another beat-em-up I spent time with, Battletoads and Double Dragon, the ultimate team on the SNES. So grab your controller and maybe a slice of pizza, and let's hit the throttle to the gaming wasteland. Turtles in Time will always stick with me as one of those games that just hit at the right moment. My friend Reed and I rented it from the local video store. Probably more times than I can count. I usually like staying over at Reed's place, mostly because his dad treated me like part of the family. He'd even given us the living room TV for the night so we could kick back with a movie and of course our gaming session with Turtles in Time. Looking back, Reed's dad was a pretty awesome guy. He was a private truck driver and he had that cool laid-back vibe that made me feel welcome, considering I missed my home in Hawaii. I remember both of us being hyped to finally get our hands on the game. Now Reed, he only owned one game back then. I mentioned it before on this channel. Yeah, it was Rival Turf. Not Final Fight, nope, Rival Turf. Why Reed? Why? Anyway, back to Turtles in Time. This game captured that arcade feel, even though I've never actually played the real arcade cabinet. Not like the first Turtles game, which I did play in the arcades. But honestly, it didn't matter. We were both into TMNT in a big way. We loved the cartoon, we loved the movie, and we had played TMNT 1 and my copy of TMNT 2, the arcade game for the NES. What blew me away back then was how many foot soldiers came at us on screen. And besides Turtles 3 for the NES, this SNES version had each turtle have their own combos and special moves. That felt like a big deal. I remember picking Leonardo during the first playthrough. Normally, back in the arcades, I always picked Raphael, but this time, I stuck with Leo. And for the story, I was expecting April to get kidnapped again, but nope. This time she's fine. Instead, Shredder kidnaps the Statue of Liberty. Yeah, okay. That didn't make much sense, but whatever. I was ready to beat up some foot soldiers. Now each of the turtles plays a little differently in Turtles in Time, and depending on your style, you'll probably find yourself favoring one over the others. Let me break it down. Donatello easily became my go-to turtle in this game. In most TMNT games, he's all about the reach, and thankfully, that's true here as well. I was honestly surprised by how much range Don has compared to the others, especially since in most of the NES games, except maybe the first one, his reach didn't feel as useful.
In Turtles in Time, it makes a big difference. His special attack's pretty cool too. He plants his staff on the ground, launches himself forward, and kicks enemies as he propels past them. Between the reach and the special move, Don was hands down my favorite turtle to use. Now Michelangelo, I'll be honest, he wasn't my favorite here. His nunchucks felt a little too slow for my taste. But to be fair, Mikey hits harder than you'd expect. His attacks pack a punch, and his special move isn't bad at all. He jumps forward and swings his nunchucks outward, which does solid damage. It's just that sluggish feel that kept me from using him much. Leonardo, being the leader and the balanced turtle, was pretty middle of the road for me. His attacks are fine, and his special move, a spinning sword attack, worked well for clearing enemies when I got surrounded. The only thing that bugged me was his final combo slice. It's this jumping sword slash that just didn't have the reach I wanted. A lot of times I'd go to finish off a foot soldier and come up just short. Still, for beginners or anyone who wants an all-around option, Leo's a solid pick. Then there's Raphael, who actually ended up being my second favorite turtle to use. Raph is fast, really fast. His attacks come out quick, and I find myself tearing through foot soldiers without much trouble. His special move, though, it's a spinning kick, and honestly, it didn't feel that great to use. It just lacked the impact of the others. But overall, Raph's speed more than made up for it. In the end, Donatello was my top pick. That reach, combined with his special attack, just fit my style perfectly. He was the most fun for me to use, and in a game like Turtles in Time, that's what matters.
Just to be clear though, I ended up beating the game with Leonardo. Mostly for nostalgia's sake, he was my first pick when I rented this game with my friend Reed all those years ago, so it just feels right.
After Konami's success with TMNT 2, the arcade game on the NES, it was clear fans wanted more Ninja Turtles. But by 1992, arcades weren't the only place for beat-em-ups. The Super Nintendo was everywhere, and Konami knew they could do something special with it. Instead of just giving players a straight port of the arcade version, Konami rebuilt Turtles in Time from the ground up for the SNES. Released in August 1992, this wasn't just a quick cash-in, it was designed to take full advantage of the SNES hardware. The project, led by director Masahiro Ueno, the same designer behind the original TMNT arcade game, and even The Simpsons arcade beat-em-up. With his experience guiding the project, Konami aimed to capture that arcade magic while making the most of the Super Nintendo's capabilities. New stages were added, boss fights were reworked, and features like Mode 7 graphics. The SNES fancy scaling and rotation effects were used to give players moments like spinning tunnels and those famous screen throws that had enemies flying straight at you. Konami's SNES team focused on tightening the controls and making sure it felt like an arcade game. Even if you were playing at home, for many of us, this was the closest thing to having the arcade cabinet in our living room. Now, like most beat-em-ups from that era, Turtles in Time didn't exactly win awards for storytelling, but it did its job. Shredder is back, as always, and after getting his butt kicked yet again, he decides to steal the Statue of Liberty and send the Turtles through time using some weird Dimension X tech. Why? Because he's Shredder, that's what he does. The Turtles get thrown across different eras, battling their way from prehistoric times to a futuristic city, all to make their way back home and stop Shredder once and for all. As for the characters, you've got all the familiar faces: Leonardo, Donatello, Michelangelo, and Raphael, each with their own weapon and slightly different stats. Classic villains like Bebop and Rocksteady, this time as pirates, the Rat King, Leatherhead, and even Toka and Razar from Secret of the Ooze. And of course, you'll eventually face Super Shredder, who's ready to ruin your day at the end of the game. One thing I've always liked about Turtles in Time is how the game keeps changing things up. You're not stuck in the city streets the whole time. The game actually throws you through different time periods, which keeps things fresh. It kicks off at night in Big Apple, 3 a.m. Classic Turtle vibes. You're fighting waves of foot soldiers until you face Baxter Stockman in his mutant fly form. He flies around attacking with a machine gun and a sticky handgun. Then you head into Alley Cat Blues, clearing out back alleys and construction zones before facing Metalhead, this robotic turtle with some pretty cool animation. After that comes Sewer Surfing, one of my favorite stages. You're riding a hoverboard through the sewers, dodging obstacles and taking out waves of foot soldiers, until you face the Rat King, who's cruising around in his little sewer boat. The thing I always remembered about this level was the turtle shouting, my toe," whenever he hit one of those spiky obstacles. That always made me laugh as a kid. From there, things kick up a notch when you invade the Technodrome. You've got a double boss fight against Toka and Razor, straight from the second Turtles movie, and then a unique fight against Shredder himself. Except this time, you're tossing foot soldiers directly at the screen using Mode 7 effects. Back then, that felt like next level stuff. Then comes the time travel twist. Suddenly, you're getting thrown across different eras. You fight Slash in the prehistoric level, take down Bebop and Rocksteady aboard a pirate ship, face Leatherhead in the Wild West stage, and then blast through the futuristic Neon Knight Rider stage, where you're racing on hoverboards and eventually fight Krang. Finally, you're back in the Technodrome for one last showdown against Super Shredder and the final Shell Shock stage. What I love is that every stage feels distinct. One minute you're riding hoverboards in a neon city, the next you're brawling on a pirate ship. It's the variety that keeps the game fun, even all these years later. Looking back, what really sticks with me about Turtles in Time isn't just the mechanics, it's how the whole experience came together. The gameplay was fast, fluid, and just fun. It didn't need to be complex. You picked it up and felt locked in, whether you were solo or playing with a friend. And part of what made it all so memorable, the music. Composers Mutsuhiko Izumi and Kazuhiko Uehara gave each stage its own personality, from Big Apple 3 a.m. to Sewer Surfing. Every track amped up the energy like a Saturday morning cartoon. Even now, these tunes instantly take me back to late nights at Reed's house, controllers in hand. Pros: tight, responsive controls, colorful, cartoon-like graphics that still hold up, memorable music, great level variety. Local co-op made it perfect for weekends with friends. Throwing enemies at the screen, iconic. Cons: only 2 players, compared to the 4-player arcade version. The game's short, you can finish it under an hour. Combat is simple, once you learn the moves, there's not much strategy beyond button mashing. Some of the special moves and final attacks weren't great for a few of the turtles. But honestly, none of those things really mattered when you were a kid renting this with your friends. The game was just plain fun.
90s Game Break.
Alright, Retro Warriors, for today's 90s Game Break, we're looking at a crossover I somehow missed as a kid. Battletoads and Double Dragon, the ultimate team on the Super Nintendo. Now, I grew up loving Double Dragon. Billy and Jimmy Lee were some of my go-to heroes back in the day, especially with Super Double Dragon on the SNES and Double Dragon 2 for the NES. So finding out they teamed up with Battletoads, that definitely caught my attention. It's one of those games that makes you stop and go, wait, what? But hey, this was the 90s, crossovers like this just happened. So what's the story? The Dark Queen from the Battletoads series teams up with a new villain called the Shadow Boss, and together they're planning to take over Earth using a massive spaceship called the Colossus. Naturally, the Battletoads decides to crash the party, but since this is too big for them alone, they call in backup from Billy and Jimmy Lee. You can pick any of the 3 Toads or the Double Dragon Brothers, each with their own fighting style. Gameplay-wise, it's a classic side-scrolling beat-em-up, simple but solid. You're punching, kicking, and slamming your way through waves of enemies. It's got that classic Rare style, with over-the-top animations and a lot of attitude. Now I'll be honest, the game's tougher than I expected. I didn't get too far yet, but with a little more practice, I know I'll get better at it. This is the kind of game that feels like it rewards you the more time you put into learning its patterns and controls. It's definitely a challenge, but that's not a bad thing. The graphics are bright and cartoonish, just like you'd expect from a Battletoads game. The soundtrack does its job, though nothing stood out for me. Still, the overall vibe is pure early 90s beat-em-up fun. If you're into either series, or just want to experience a crossover that could only happen in the 90s, this one's worth checking out. I'm looking forward to spending more time with it and seeing how far I can actually get.
Quick side note before we wrap up, I just want to mention that I've got a memberships page now. It's totally optional, but if you feel like supporting the channel, I offer a tier called Retro Warrior Night for just 99 cents. That gets you loyalty badges, emojis, and a shout out at the end of my videos. Again, no pressure at all, it's just there if you're interested. And that's Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles: Turtles in Time, a game that still holds up even after all these years. It's crazy how much of this game came flooding back to me while playing this childhood favorite again. But there's one thing I completely forgot. You actually have to beat the game on hard mode to see the real ending. Yeah, I forgot all about that. So after I beat it the first time on normal, I sat there like, wait, what? That's it? Then it hit me, oh yeah, hard mode. So I went back, played through the whole thing again, and this time I got the proper ending. And let me tell you, that ending, totally tubular. Yeah, I'm stealing that straight from the Turtles classic catchphrases. Seeing that final cutscene, I felt like a kid again. I'd completely forgotten how cool it actually was, and reliving that moment after all these years, pure nostalgia. Thanks for joining me on this trip back to 1992, and remember, gaming is your road to adventure.